Hey there, my friends. What's up, peeps? And how's everyone doing on this fine Saturday? Well, out here, I guess it's a little overcast, but it's pretty damn warm. If it's over 60 here in Portland area, it's warm. And I guess that's all perspective, right? It's all dependent upon what you're used to. If you live in a warm climate, if you live in a cold climate, what you consider to be warm or cold is going to vary. Just like if you live in a climate where a metaphoric climate of liberalism or conservatism, depending on the area you've grown up in. You might think certain values or certain morals are more important, or what the norm is to you. And as human beings, what we consider to be normal for us varies widely according to the circumstance and community that you live in. And while there's always been debate and argument about who's right and who's wrong in the world, generally each neighborhood, each community, each city, each state deals with things on their own and doesn't really give much of a shit about what other people are doing as far as how other people live their lives, at least in the past, because it doesn't directly affect us as far as we know. But in the modern day, with the internet and all of our instantaneous connections through social media, we find ourselves more and more judgmental about other people, more and more assumptions about how other people should or should not live their lives. We've got virtue signaling over the top. We've got people telling others they should be vegans. We've got people telling others they should be Christians. It's no longer Jehovah's Witnesses just knocking on your door, right? They are bombarding, other people's, let's say, videos, or with a bunch of Christians complaining to an atheist, or a bunch of atheists complaining to a Christian. None of that really matters. People just need to be able to shut the fuck up and live their own lives and leave other people alone to their own devices. But that can't always work. In fact, I guess this comes down to when it's important to speak out, when it's important to stand up for yourself. When you hear bullshit, when you see things in society that you just know are bullshit. Because we know as individuals, if we're thinking people, if we're rational, and if we're insightful, at least as much as possible, we realize that we're faulty quite often. We don't know the truth about everything. We don't understand all the details about what life entails, or why we're here, or what our purpose is, or many of the aspects, the most important questions that we have about life are basically unanswerable, and therefore we are referred to subjectivity. Pick a religion or pick an ideal and stick with your ideal and hope that that works for you, right? So there are certain things. If I sit here and tell you I think or I don't think God exists, we could argue till the cows come home, and the cows do eventually come home. But cows, what else are they going to do? Of course they come home. We could sit here and argue about this shit all day, right? And it goes nowhere because there's no obvious answer to it. There's no way to wrap up the whole of life and say, oh, this is what nature is, or this is what existence is. But there are many aspects about existence that we do agree on. And this is why we don't debate them. This is why we don't argue about whether the grass is green. Sure, there might be a conversation about, I wonder if you see color differently than I do. And there might be somebody out there who says, no, grass is not green, it's blue. But nobody's arguing against that point. For the main point that it doesn't affect you. It's not a deal in your life where it's going to affect you personally if someone else thinks that grass should be blue. Doesn't matter. None of that matters. What does matter is when society starts to have as I mentioned the other day in a video, the collective delusion or collective illusion about what is right or what is wrong or what other people think. And then we start to believe things like, as I said, there's no difference between men and women, for example. Thought that was the perfect example because biologically, we all have the common sense that there is such a thing as men and women. I was using the example as I heard someone mention about toxic masculinity the other day. And there was a video that came on, I don't recall who it was, but how ridiculous it is, this idea of toxic masculinity that, sure, there are toxic people that behave in a toxic way, if you want to call it that. But this isn't what masculinity is, in the sense that just being tough or just being strong is not toxic in itself. Abusing others is. Therefore, even the weakest man could be out there abusing someone physically or mentally, And that would be toxic masculinity, even if it comes from a place that has nothing to do with manhood. It happens with women too. It doesn't matter whether it's coming from a man or a woman, it's aggression, right? And that's generally what we deem to be toxic. And in that way of thinking, we would say, well, every single person who ever joined a military is a toxic man. It's total bullshit, of course. There's women that join the military too. But that's not the point. The point being that men and women definitely have biological differences, and mentally, the way that men handle things. In other words, what I think of as a man is someone who can stand up for themselves, someone who, I guess, just... I haven't thought about this before I made the video, so this isn't really the main point of my conversation, but that it doesn't even matter. It doesn't even occur to me that being a man or a woman is a big deal. It's only a big deal to a small segment of society who makes it a bigger deal than it is, and social media blows it out of proportion. Most people just roll their eyes, they live their lives, and they say, whatever, I'm a man or a woman. Why should I have to even try to define or explain this? Why is this an issue in society? But it's not just that. It's many of the things that we blow out of proportion, many of the things that we think are bigger deals than they are. And I think it's a reflection of a weak society. It's a reflection of where we are right now. Because around the world, every nation, every neighborhood, every community has their own problem, their own news, their own media. Some neighborhoods are much more concerned about the crime or the murder rates. In a more boring place, they might be complaining about, Uncle Jack down at the farm and what his wife said in some sewing circle somewhere. Gossip, right? The way that we're always looking for an enemy. We're always looking for somebody who's holding us back. We're always pointing at whether it be this idea that a patriarchal society of all men is just dominating and that we have to stop this and, turn it into a matriarchy. Fine, go ahead, women take charge. I don't think that's the point at all. And for most people, we don't care about that. In other words, for most men and women, there's no competition. It's not a battle between who's right and who's wrong. But for a small segment of society, it is a battle. And in the same way, this is, of course, because we have the convenience and the time to sit here and worry about petty shit like this. In the same way, religion. In places where people believe what they believe, they don't sit around and try to justify themselves to others. They live their lives, they practice their religion. But in places where people have a lot of time on their hands, they're able to go out and convince others that they are wrong. And really, it's just to prove to yourself you're right. In other words, the more we push our views in society, there's two reasons why we tend to push our views, even when it's uncomfortable, when we tend to speak out. Either one, because we truly believe that change needs to occur within the thinking of people to improve a society for us now and for the future. This is the reason why I speak out on issues like this, because I see progress is possible. I see that true understanding is possible to the extent that at least we can cope and understand that, hey, people are different. Hey, it is what it is. In other words, if we can cooperate with people who are different in our friend group or our family, we can do the same for strangers too. We don't have to always point the finger at others. So it's either to protect our future because we really believe in our hearts that we're doing the right thing, or, and this is kind of a new phenomenon, that we are virtue signaling and telling everybody else, this is how you should live your life because this is what I think is the best way to live your life. This would be the attack vegans, right? The PETAs of the world, the ones who, might have a good intention in their own minds, but never thought it through. And therefore, even though, the road to hell was paved with good intentions, the best plans or the best ideals matter nothing if they're not thought through, if you haven't actually processed all the different angles, and, more importantly, admitted the shortcomings of what we believe or don't believe. This is very important. We want to believe that what we think is righteous. It's very hard for people to admit that they don't know shit. I've met very few people in this world who can just say, well, I don't have any of the answers, I don't know. Or even more rare is, wow, I was wrong about that and I changed my mind. Because there's comfort and solace in always being right. Or trying to stick by your what you believe, or to try to be vindicated. Like, I was right. I guess in the future we'll probably call it the Alex Jones syndrome, where Alex Jones was right. Not relating to this topic, but just because people will say something and others won't believe it. And then when something, even one thing is proven to be true, they'll try to vindicate themselves and not really looking at the bigger picture of it doesn't matter, the topic doesn't matter, who's right doesn't matter, rather. It's how do we all make sure that we are all right together? Because it's not a competition. We're living above that now. We're living beyond that now. And yet, when I look at society and how we behave, look at the Putins of the world, making war on another country and killing innocent civilians. And we even have people out there who are so wrapped up in politics that they're justifying what Putin's doing. There's no way in hell I could justify ever killing civilians. I'm a pacifist when it comes to war. I don't believe that any wars have been valid or fought on any valid grounds in a very long time. And even the ones that are fought, the war is never justified. Because a war is started by one side. And if the other side fights for their rights to protect their land, that's not a war, that's an attack, an assault, and it's self-defense, which is way different than two sides agreeing, let's go to battle. Get the red coats and the blue coats out there with your rifles. We're living in a different world from that, and it's like we're acting like children. It's almost like I expect too much of people. Because I think, I'm only 46. I've spent quite a bit of time thinking in my life, but also doing things. It's not like I'm always, researching. Nobody has the time to constantly process and read and understand the ideas of the world. And even if we do, the more we read, often the more ignorant we become because we get wrapped up in one idea and think we understand things that we really don't. And to be able to step back and laugh at ourselves, I've come to the conclusion that it doesn't really matter. None of it. When it comes to defending your position or proving your points, the only time that it really matters is when you feel like you have to speak out because something in society is harmful to other groups, even though it may be protecting one group. For example, let's not bring up any examples. I think I've already done that. One last note here is that the more vehemently, is that the right word? And the more intensely that a person defends their position against another, trying to prove themselves or trying to prove that they're not what someone else says they are. For example, you say, I don't believe that, males who transition and should become athletes and compete against women. And you're instantly labeled as a transphobe. If you're an intelligent, rational thinking human, you don't care that somebody called you a transphobe. Because you're not addressing a person's personal choice. You're addressing a sport which has rules and regulations that can be abused, and that's what we feel is happening. But since a group feels marginalized, they're able to say no and scream racist or scream transphobe or homophobe. And I know I brought this up before, but this is very important. This is what they're calling the woke culture. And I hate that word and I hate that idea. But I understand it. Because I have always wanted to see people who feel marginalized accepted by society. But the fact is, you can't force that on people. You can't force people to accept you. You have to earn respect. And if you can't earn respect, then the only way to get it is through power and dominance. And if you don't have the power, then organizing in groups to make others feel like they're the haters or the racists only serves to push you further away as a person who just wants to be recognized as an individual, if that makes sense. In other words, most of us out there that I've met in my life at least are willing to accept people and say, do what you will with your life. But when you start putting that shit on everybody and telling everyone how to speak, what pronouns to use, even the people who are on your side are going to abandon you. And it's a very strange thing. It's a very strange time to be alive where people are afraid to speak their true feelings. And I think that that's part of what courage is. The ability to speak up, but for the right reasons. As I said, to improve society. Because we want the best for everyone. Not because we don't want people to have equality or equal rights. That's bullshit. It's because we want everyone to be treated equally. That means not attacking people on Twitter because they said something you interpreted a certain way as being hate speech. And so even many liberals are completely turning against this whole idea of, being against speech, not allowing certain people to speak on campuses. We're just living in a weird time, but it's not new. It's a cycle. There are no, new ideas, only new processes and new cycles. And right now we're living kind of in the honestly, not to use that cliche, but the Roman times. Towards the end, everybody was living decadently, and it was just a complete mess. And I want to see us improve. I want to see us survive and succeed as a species, because unlike Rome collapsing, in which it just dissolved and the world went on, if the world collapses today, we're in a lot more trouble. We have way too much to keep up on and too much infrastructure. The thing is, people will be fine. People will always find a way. And one day, I guarantee you, our problems will be much bigger than whether men and women are real or gender exists. Just a thought about life. And I mean no harm from it. Just some thoughts. Peace and love, and I'll talk to y'all next time.